Please, speak freely.
So it's been a couple of weeks now since the finale of the Book of Boba Fett, and it's safe to say that this has probably been the most controversial Star Wars project, maybe since The Last Jedi, although depending on how you view The Rise of Skywalker, that may not necessarily be true. But the Book of Boba Fett has been quite an interesting case, as it has been a new Star Wars show on Disney Plus like The Mandalorian, but unlike The Mandalorian, this show has had quite a divisive kind of turn among the fan base, as there have been some people who have found the show to be quite boring and kind of a waste of time, and other people who quite enjoyed it. So what I want to do in this video is just kind of break down my own personal thoughts on the show, where I stand on it, and how I feel like it compares to other things within the Star Wars universe. So the Book of Boba Fett is of course all about the famed bounty hunter himself, Boba Fett, who, after now surviving the events of Return of the Jedi, has now made his way back into Tatooine to kind of reinvigorate himself and to kind of reimagine himself as a crime lord inside of Tatooine, as opposed to being a bounty hunter. But instead of ruling with fear, like Jabba the Hutt did, he wants to now rule with respect. This was an interesting way to take the character for sure. I think this is definitely not what a lot of people were expecting with Boba Fett. You know, he is kind of this revered, famed, kind of fearful bounty hunter who people across the galaxy were kind of known to be afraid of. Whereas in this, they kind of made him obviously a lot more respectable and a lot more kind of sure of himself, of being like, you know, I want to be respected, I want to be a guy who people are not necessarily afraid of, but, you know, want to work for out of respect rather than fear. He's trying to do the opposite of what Jabba the Hutt did. And that's quite an interesting way to take the character. Definitely not what I was expecting. But Tamura Morrison, who of course returns to reprise his role as Boba Fett, you know, from Mandalorian, he was really good in this show. I think he serves his role as he needs to. He's not necessarily the greatest actor in the world, but I think, you know, what they needed him to do in this show, I think he was able to handle, you know, well enough. And I think his sort of playoff, particularly with Ming-Na Wen as Fennec Shand, was really good. I think she was great in this. I really enjoyed her in Mandalorian, but she never really got, you know, much focus. Here, she gets a lot more to do. Still not a major starring role or anything like that. She is kind of just there to kind of push Boba in certain directions, but she's still a cool character nonetheless, and I'm excited to see more of her as kind of the universe evolves a little bit more. But I think the character turn, particularly with Boba Fett, was one of the most interesting things, and I think that's kind of where a lot of people kind of initially turned on the show, even in the early days, because people were like, well, this isn't what we thought Boba Fett was going to be. Now, the show does pretty much exclusively take place on Tatooine, which at first I was kind of a bit, like, in a huff about, because Tatooine, I'm sorry, it's so boring now. Like, we've seen it so many times. It's the go-to planet in Star Wars. You know, even just, like, a standard desert planet, like we got Jakku in the sequel trilogy. Like, there's always a desert planet, and it's always Tatooine. It's just boring now. But what I will say is that this is the most interesting Tatooine has been ever, in my opinion. Mainly because Tatooine has always just been shown as a planet with nothing on it. Whereas at least with this, we did delve into like the crime underworld element of Tatooine, which is something that hasn't really been explored. And I really enjoyed that side of it. And also, this show, at least in the first half, really focuses on the Tusken Raiders. And kind of getting involved with them was really interesting as well. Like, as a fan, you know, someone who has kind of seen the Tusken Raiders or the Sand People, you know, as part of the Star Wars universe, you know, but nothing more than just kind of like these random creatures, to actually explore them, how they work, how they sort of connect with each other, how their tribe works, was, again, something I didn't expect from a Boba Fett show, but it just added to the world of Tatooine and made it way more interesting, way more than I was expecting, because like I say, I wasn't really looking forward to spending another 7 hours on Tatooine, but given the fact that we did explore new elements of it, I can't really criticize that. Now, speaking of the Tusken Raiders, another element of this show that people were kind of hit or miss on was the flashbacks. There is a lot of flashbacks, particularly in the first half of this show, that kind of shows how Boba Fett went from where he was at the end of Return of the Jedi to where we saw him in Mandalorian Season 2, and kind of how he became this kind of tribal kind of character. We actually find out that Boba Fett was actually, while he does manage to get out of the Sarlacc pit himself, he was actually rescued by the Tusken Raiders, and he grew up with them for a few weeks and kind of learned their ways, became a part of their tribe, and became a respected member among that sort of crew. And that was really cool as well. Again, kind of adds on to my previous point about how I really enjoyed just kind of spending time with the Tusken Raiders and kind of learning more about them. These flashback sequences, I think, did add a lot of humility, not only to those as a group, but also to Boba Fett as well. It kind of allowed us to see the man under the mask properly for the first time, which we hadn't really seen before this show. So it kind of added humility and humanity to both of those different character groups, which I really did enjoy. Now, one thing that a lot of people also weren't too hot on in regards to these flashbacks was the structure of them, particularly in the first 4 episodes. The series does bounce back and forth quite a lot between a present-day storyline and also a past storyline. You kind of have what's going on in the present day with Boba Fett on Tatooine, kind of managing the crime families, and you've also got Boba in the Tusken Raiders. For me personally, the structure of it didn't bother me too much because, like I say, I was actually a lot more interested in the Tusken Raider stuff than I was with the crime family stuff, because it felt like the crime family stuff, there just wasn't a lot going on, like there wasn't a lot of forward momentum to really get me excited or to push that story forward, whereas with the Tusken Raider stuff, at least we were learning something. And also, as someone whose like favorite TV show of all time is Arrow, which literally the first 5 seasons of that show is literally just jumping back and forth, I'm kind of okay with that. So, you know, that the structure of it didn't really bother me too much. The problem comes with the fact that, like I say, one storyline was far more interesting than the other. So it kind of made it so you have this one part of the story which wasn't like the most enthusing thing in the world, but at least, like I say, we were learning something with the Tusken Raiders. But then it would cut back to the present day where we have Boba and Fennec Shand just kind of walking around Tatooine, and it just wasn't that interesting. Like there wasn't really anything going on. And that is kind of the biggest issue with the show as a whole. Yeah, the biggest problem with the Book of Boba Fett is that there really isn't any forward momentum to the show whatsoever. It kind of just went along, particularly I'm talking about the first 4 episodes in particular. They just kind of go along at a snail's pace, and, you know, sometimes a slow burn or something like this can work, but because there's literally nothing at the end of each episode to kind of get you excited for the next thing, it just kind of made me feel just deflated at the end. Like, every episode I was like, oh, well, that's over, and I'll watch it next week, I guess. There wasn't anything to make me go, oh, I want to watch the next episode, or, oh, that was a really cool reveal, or that was a really cool way to end the episode. There was nothing like that. It was just like, oh, Boba's walked around, he's spoken to this guy, he's, you know, had an argument with him, disagreements here. There was nothing exciting about it. And it just kind of made the show feel really slow and really uninteresting and really unengaging. And given the fact that this show did release weekly, which can really work for something like The Mandalorian or the Marvel shows because they keep people coming back and keep people talking, people weren't talking about Boba Fett because nothing happened. However, that was until episode 5. Where at the end of episode 4 we heard Fennec Shand say, you know, you can get help if you know where to look, and they played the Mandalorian theme. And in episode 5 we essentially got an entire Mandalorian episode with Pedro Pascal as Din Djarin, and this was by far the best episode of the show. And it's hilarious because this show, you know, this episode 5 of, I believe it was called The Return of the Mandalorian, that episode just completely demonstrates everything that is the problem with Boba Fett, because that Mandalorian episode was so good, and it was the best episode of the season, and it didn't have Boba Fett in it at all. And that was just amazing to me. Now, granted, I don't want to spend too long talking about the Mandalorian stuff, because frankly, it was really, really great. But like I say, I think it kind of represents the fact that Boba Fett himself as a character and this show and this story just wasn't that good or interesting, given the fact that as soon as the Mandalorian came in, it was all about that. And it just made me want season 3 of The Mandalorian. That's all I wanted to do now. I don't care about Boba Fett. I don't care about this crime family story. Like, can we just move on to Mandalorian season 3? Because it's clearly far more interesting. But I loved all the Mandalorian stuff. Like, episode 5 was literally Mandalorian season 2.5, and it was absolutely incredible. We got to see so much more with Din Djarin and kind of the history of Mandalore. We actually got to see, like, some flashbacks and stuff. Really great. And again, just having Pedro back, you know, our boy Pedro, it was great. And also episode 6 as well, obviously, which kind of was cameo central. Episode 6 was really exciting. Like, I do feel like episode 6 wasn't as strong as 5, because 6 kind of felt like they were just chucking characters at the screen. Like, obviously we got Luke Skywalker, Grogu returned, Cobb Vanth came back, which was really cool. I didn't expect that. He was great. And also we got the introduction of Cad Bane from the Clone Wars, and also from Bad Batch. Really fucking cool. Because I mean, I kind of predicted that Cad Bane was going to show up in this, but I didn't think they were actually going to do it. But then when you have that shot, like possibly my favorite scene in the entire show was kind of that Mexican showdown between Cobb Vanth and Cad Bane, like when they sort of meet each other in the desert, and it's like that Western showdown. Awesome stuff. So yeah, episode 5 and 6 were completely different, completely separated from the rest of the show, and it does kind of demonstrate the fact that clearly everything else going on in the show with Boba Fett and his story on Tatooine just wasn't that good. And I think this leads into a different issue, which is that I think possibly Disney just jumped the gun with this show. I think they saw, obviously they brought Boba Fett into Mandalorian Season 2, and that was a great surprise. You know, that was a great moment. When he showed up and we actually got the return of Boba Fett and it confirmed in canon that he was alive, awesome stuff. But Boba Fett is a character I've never really understood the love for. Like, he's always been this fan favourite character, and I've never really understood why. Because in the original trilogy, Boba Fett doesn't really do anything. He's literally a background character who gets into a fight in episode 6 and then is killed off. I never really understood why Boba Fett was this huge popular character. And I don't think Disney did either, because they clearly said, okay, well, we brought him in Season 2, let's give him his own show, he's a fan favourite character. But when they actually came to writing the show, they went, well, what do we do? Because we can't really do a bounty hunter show, which is what it should have been, because that's basically what Mandalorian is, so we can't do that again. So we have to do something different. Okay, well, let's do something crime-based. Okay, well, what can we do? Well, he's on Tatooine. There's not really a lot on Tatooine. Oh, well, we need to get the show out before the end of the year. It just felt really rushed. It felt like there was no real energy behind it. And that's a shame when you have someone like Robert Rodriguez who was directing this. You know, Robert Rodriguez has so much flair and style in his filmmaking, and it just doesn't shine through here at all. And it just feels completely wasted. And like I say, for Boba Fett, who I think has the potential to be a really cool character, unfortunately, in the Star Wars universe, I think his potential and his void has been filled by Din Djarin. Din Djarin has kind of become what Boba Fett would have been had he got his own show first. You know, because if you're going to do a Boba Fett show, realistically, you want it to be a bounty hunter show, but that's what The Mandalorian is really at its core. So it kind of makes Boba Fett feel like a bit of a useless character when you have Mandalorian who's so good and so beloved. Boba Fett just kind of got left by the wayside. So overall, the Book of Boba Fett for me, it was a bit of a misfire. I don't hate the show or anything. I did, you know, enjoy it enough week to week to keep watching it. And there was some really exciting stuff, you know, particularly with The Mandalorian. Episode 5 and 6 were really cool and really exciting as a Star Wars fan and as a Mandalorian fan. But everything to actually do with Boba Fett and his story on Tatooine, it just wasn't very engaging. It wasn't very interesting. It didn't keep me hooked. And I think that overall, there was just this massive, huge missed opportunity with this show. And clearly a kind of misinterpretation of this character where people thought, oh, let's do a Boba Fett show. He's a fan favorite character. It's been a long time coming. But when it came to actually doing the story and giving this character justice, they just completely dropped the ball. But what did you guys think about the Book of Boba Fett? Make sure to let me know your thoughts on it in the comment section down below. Did you really enjoy it, or are you in agreement with me? Do you think it was a little bit of a weak show among the Star Wars universe? Whatever you think, let me know in the comment section down below. And if you want to see more content like this, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any uploads from me. And I hope to see you guys again next time.